Holy freaking crap. The Rangers have their manager. They have signed Bruce Bochy, the 3-time World Series winner, to a 3-year contract. We're getting into all that this means, what this means for the Rangers offseason, and more. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Today is Friday, October 21st, and Bruce Bochy is the Rangers' next manager. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment any single thing below. Now, you may have, it's entirely possible that this morning you listened to my Friday episode with Grant Schiller talking all about Kumar Rocker. Recorded all of those on Tuesday night, spread them out over the last 3 days. Some really great stuff if you haven't checked that out. But this necessitated an emergency podcast. I was standing in line at the grocery store when I got the notification from Ken Rosenthal that was just the Rangers tweeting out a graphic of Bruce Bochy wearing Rangers gear saying, "Hey, we hired our new manager." And of course, I almost dropped my phone. I was like, no, this can't happen. We would have had some advanced warnings, some news. And the Rangers are pretty good about keeping that stuff in-house, especially when the 2 primary beat writers that work for the 2 bigger outlets covering the Rangers in Levi Weaver of The Athletic and Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News are both on vacation at the same time. I think Evan is in Vermont and Levi is all the way across the ocean in England. So, they were not going to break the news this week. So the Rangers are like, yeah, let's go ahead and do this now. I was thinking that, like, maybe it would happen after the World Series, but no, the Rangers have Bruce Bochy. If you don't know who this guy is, welcome to the rock you've been living under. I'm assuming you started following baseball, like, this year, in which case, welcome. That's awesome. Congratulations. But if you don't know who Bruce Bochy is, he is a 3-time World Series winning manager, managed for 25 seasons between 1995 and 2019. He was started with the San Diego Padres, took them to the playoffs several times, even to the 1998 World Series, where they were swept by one of the best Yankee teams of all time. You know, it happens. Then in 2007, he went to the Giants, and during his 13-year run there, he won 3 World Series, including one in 2010 against the Rangers, then in 2012 against, I believe, the Tigers, and 2014, I think that was against the Royals. I can't remember exactly, but it was the source of even year BS. It did not last. They did not win in 2016 or 2018 or even in 2020, but Bruce Bochy was an incredible manager. I hadn't even done an episode. I was planning on, like, Monday doing an episode on who the Rangers should look at, candidates they should think about. But in my mind, the top of the list was always Bruce Bochy. This is a guy who has got the championship experience. He is not one of those old head. I didn't think it would be a situation. I still don't think it would be a situation like Tony La Russa, where a guy who hasn't managed in a while comes back. La Russa, it was much longer since he had last managed, and it was more of ownership wanted to be buddy with this guy, and so they brought him in, and there was a whole bunch of other mess that happened in the time of him, between him retiring as manager and coming back. Plus, he didn't really fit that team. Bochy is an unconventional guy. He is a guy who is always kind of beyond his years, beyond the current status quo, always a guy who, like the Giants, were willing to be inventive and try some new things and be creative and not afraid to go against the status quo, and that served him very, very well as the manager of the San Francisco Giants and the San Diego Padres. He actually did manage Chris Young in, I believe, his final season with the Padres, the Rangers GM at this point. The Rangers had a meeting with him in Nashville, and it was kind of clear that, like, this guy was the top front runner, and if he wanted to come back to baseball, then this was where he was going to come back to baseball. Now, he had already something I didn't realize until reading this thing on the Dallas Morning News' website is that in July he announced that he would manage France in the World Baseball Classic qualifier back in France, which I did not think that he was going to return to baseball. He had some health complications that made it difficult for him, and kind of, I think, ultimately led a little bit into his decision to retire when he was on the Giants. But by the way, he was born in France. Fun little fact about him: he did have a where we go? Several year playing career. I had this up a minute ago. Let's see, 9 years, 358 games. He was a catcher, of course, but he's also the manager of the year back in I believe 2010. I want to say was when he was the manager of the year. He's won the pennant 4 times. He's won 3 World Series. Every time he got to the World Series with the Giants, he ended up winning it all. He was not there for their turnaround in 2021 when they went from pretty aggressively mediocre to really darn good, but he was there to turn it all around in 2007, where things just did not look that great. And the team that he had in 2010, especially, it did not seem like a World Series team, but the postseason is chaotic and crazy. We have seen that with the Rangers. He is a fantastic postseason manager. He is a great manager of egos and bullpens and starting pitchers, and he brings the gravitas. And I hate saying this because it's such a cliche and so dumb, but the Rangers are very intent on using the championship caliber DNA, which, again, he has 3 of, that the Rangers really, really wanted. And as much as I like Tony Beasley, and as much as I think the other managers the Rangers have hired during my obsession with the Rangers in Ron Washington and Jeff Bannister and even Chris Woodward, I think they were right for the time. I don't know that Chris Woodward ever would have gotten a fair shake, but again, he didn't quite perform this year. I think 2019 was a big indicator of like, hey, if I've got some decent talent, I can do something with it. But it seemed like the voice wasn't quite right of a fit with this club. Same with Jeff Bannister in the end, and Ron Washington's tenure ended a little bit differently. But the Rangers have gone with first-time managers for their last few managers that they've hired. I thought if they were going to go with a first-time manager, Tony Beasley probably would have been the voice, and that kind of brings me into a couple of my questions of the coaching staff. There have already been some coaching changes. But before I get into any of that, I have already done that. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered with this season more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. And we're going to talk a little bit more about BetOnline after we talk about this 3-year contract, the coaching staff, and what effect this might have on free agents and the team just in general. But first, like I said, this episode is brought to you by betonline.net. It is your number one source for all betting football and the start of the new basketball season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every single game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. Baseball playoffs. You can bet on, well, I don't know if they have some win-loss totals for the Rangers for next year, but if they already do have some of those early bets, you can go maybe take the over if you're feeling cocky about the Rangers. I don't know if, I'm sure they will have adjusted them with Bruce Bochy on there, but yeah, it's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action, because BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Now, Bruce Bochy, I feel like by far was the best choice at manager. He hasn't, of potential managers, he hasn't been out of the game that long. It was just 2019 was the last time that he was managing a major league franchise. Really not that long ago. I thought that he was retired in sunny San Diego, where I assume he still has a house. But apparently he has been residing in Nashville, Tennessee to be closer to some grandbabies. So, the coming out of retirement in Nashville, I think, is a little easier to recruit somebody back into the baseball life. He is very much a baseball lifer with 25 years experience as a manager. And I'm curious who he's going to bring along with him in his baseball life. He's got a lot of contacts there. You might be thinking, oh, Donnie Ecker, he was with the Giants Bruce Bochy was with the Giants. There was no crossover there. Bochy left in 2019. Ecker came over in 2020. Before that, he was with the Reds in 2019, and there was not a whole lot of time over there. Ecker was the Rangers bench coach this year, and Tim Hires was the hitting coach. At this point, neither of those two have been announced to not be coming back, and I think they both did a really, really great job this year. Hires was the hitting coach, and Rangers brought him over from Boston, where he'd had a lot of success there. Obviously, the fantastic offensive season in 2020 and especially in 2021 from the Giants was why the Rangers hired Donnie Ecker as their bench coach and offensive coordinator, so kind of a promotion. I thought that he might get a look at manager after they obviously went very heavy on Bruce Bochy. If Bruce Bochy said no, I think they would have given him a look. But I think the Rangers really, really like him. I bet Bochy will like him because I think, if I remember correctly, the guy who is now in charge, Gabe Kapler, I want to say that he was an associate or some kind of assistant coach under Bochy. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I think those two might be coming back. I really hope that Tony Beasley comes back. I'm a little worried of him thinking like maybe he'll get the manager job. I think he kind of knew he would always be second fiddle to Bruce Bochy, who is a future Hall of Famer, and I feel like anybody going up for their first managerial job against Bruce Bochy is going to understand when Bochy ends up getting the deal. And the Rangers are showing, again, they are super duper serious about contending. But, I mean, Tony Beasley has been in the organization for so long. I think the Rangers will really, really want to keep him around. And he's been a third base coach and infield coordinator, I think is his other title. But just a baseball lifer who loves the Ranger organization. The Rangers have shown him a lot of love. I think he did a pretty good job with a very, very difficult hand being dealt to him as the interim manager. I think that he has a lot of really great relationships with the players and the organization in general. I'm hoping that Bochy doesn't just completely get rid of the entire staff that's there. Obviously, the pitching coaches have both been informed that they are not going to come back. That was a few weeks ago. So whoever Bochy wants to hire as pitching coach, I am totally game, because the Rangers could definitely use some improvement on that pitching front in multiple different facets from, a lot of starting pitchers, and I think changing up the pitching coaches might also help as well. Not that it's necessarily their fault. They weren't given a whole lot of talent in the rotation to work with outside of John Gray and Martin Perez, but eventually changes just need to be made. So I'm really curious of who he can poach from around baseball. If he could poach somebody from his old Giants staff, some old Giants buddies. I wish there was a clearer list of like guys who were coaches at different times under Bochy that they could go and pursue. But he's got a lot of relationships around baseball, and like I said, the championship DNA, I think a lot of times that can get like overblown and like, oh, it's not really as important. Just fitting a guy who fits the style. Hiring a manager is such a difficult job because there are so many factors that go into it. You got to have a guy who fits the personalities in the room, fits the personalities in the organization, has a view and a philosophy that kind of fits with what the team is hoping to do, and that philosophy jives with higher ups in the organization and ownership and the fan base, and well, not as much the fan base, but like everybody in the room from top to bottom. And that is a whole lot of different factors that are at play, and where even sometimes really great managers can go in and not do well in a situation because things just were not working out to their favor. Like Joe Maddon and the Angels. I think Joe Maddon is overall a pretty solid manager. I don't know that he is like this god tier figure that I think everyone thought that he was, and I really didn't want the Rangers to go after him. But I think that he was kind of dealt a difficult situation in Anaheim, and even though he was a good manager, things just did not work out well for him there. And we've seen it in other places, like Jeff Bannister. I think he kind of had a one-track mind for the kind of motivation and leadership style that he was giving, and that worked perfectly in 2015 and 2016 with the veterans and the guys who had never won it all, and no one believes in you, and we gotta grit, never ever quit, and that was great. But when there was no plan B, when things were going south, I think that's when the Rangers realized, all right, thank you for those 2 playoff runs. They were a lot of fun. Stealing the division twice from the Astros with the same roster that they allegedly won a championship with. And that was really fun and funny. And I will remember that fondly forever. But moving forward, the Rangers needed a new voice, and they tried out Chris Woodward. He had a great 2019. Injuries really derailed that team, and also not having more than 2 starting pitchers who were both very good, but were just 2 starting pitchers in a rotation filled with just nuts and bolts and duct tape together, and also the 2 best hitters on the team getting hurt for basically the entire second half of the season, in Gallo and Hunter Pence. That really made life a whole lot more difficult for him in the back half, and was a really fun first year to start the podcast, and then everything has kind of been poo-pooed downhill from there. But again, I think Chris Woodward will probably be a decent manager somewhere else. I think someone else will give him a shot, but in Texas right now, the Rangers are showing we're super serial. We're for real, super duper serial. Obviously, they showed that spending $500 million in about a week and firing everybody, including the guy who built the most successful teams in franchise history. Like it hasn't been good enough for a while now. I again think JD got a little bit of the shaft there, but eventually you need something new. You need some fresh blood, and Chris Young is some fresh blood, and so is Bruce Bochy. Even though he's a little bit older, he is an outside voice, a guy with the charisma and history, and again, gravitas to maybe make an impact on some free agent signings who want to come and play for a manager who has already got 3 rings. We're going to take a quick break. We can come back. We're going to look at a little bit of an overview, what the heck the Rangers do now, and what this means for their contention in free agency. But first, this word from our sponsors. Now, I think this is really a great move for the Rangers. This is the best option out there, and I am just honestly stunned that he wanted to come back to baseball and that he chose the Rangers. Last time he was a manager, he was making around $6 million a year with the Giants. It'll probably be more than that. He'll probably be one of the higher paid managers in baseball, I would think. And I think this is going to really hold some sway when the Rangers are going for some free agents, including a guy like Carlos Rodon, who I think should be at the top of their list. Maybe even a Jacob deGrom. Is another guy who should be at the top of their list. It's their entire list should be just like pitcher. Maybe a left fielder, pitcher. Like just all of the starting pitching that you can get, the Rangers need to go after. And the Rangers need a lot of external factors to kind of sway free agents. I'm still so shocked they were able to get all the free agents that they did last year, mainly just Semien and Seager. The fact that the Rangers were able to swoop in front of all these other teams that desperately needed a shortstop, including maybe going back to the Los Angeles Dodgers, where Corey Seager had literally just won a championship, and Dodgers were like, no, it's fine, you can have him. The Yankees were like, we're gonna work a trade for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. That's going to be our workaround. We're not going to spend money on Correa or Seager or Baez or Story or any of the other big middle infielders that they maybe should have spent some money on. And the Rangers were like, all right, cool. So teams have forgotten about the Rangers being as good as they were. I've had a podcast for now 4 seasons, and the Rangers have not made the playoffs during it. And for a few years before that, I had very bad timing for when I wanted to start this podcast, as opposed to the 8 years where the Rangers were very good. One of the best teams in baseball, should have won a championship. I don't want to talk about it. In my mind, I pretend they still do. But the Rangers were really dang good for a long time, and they kind of fell behind the curve, and a lot of bad things happened to them, and they weren't able to make up for them, and that's why they have been stuck in the mire and have not been to the playoffs since 2016. That's been a while. It's been a long ride for them not making the playoffs, and they've only just recently, just last year really, it was just one season where they actually embraced the rebuild, which I think was kind of difficult, and they did a lot of things to get out of that rebuild very quickly. I think they did some things pretty well, but they didn't do everything perfectly, and this year they were still pretty far away from the playoffs. Now, granted, I think they were much improved from last year. Again, we don't have to talk all about the one-run games and how bad they were in those, but you gotta go through a few bad one-run games, badly managed bullpens and whatever, or well-managed bullpens to get to a championship, which Bruce Bochy did 3 times, and he did very well in those playoff games, in one-run games, and is not afraid to make some drastic and weird moves with his pitching staff, which, granted, his pitching staffs for those 3 World Series teams, they had quite a few Cy Young winners. The Rangers, they don't have any of those on their staff right now. They could go sign one. They could go sign a future one. I mean, there are guys like Jacob deGrom, Justin Verlander, I think he has a player option this year. If they went and got him, that'd be really freaking funny. Carlos Rodon does not have a Cy Young, but pitched almost like it the last couple of years and has a lot of promise. But the Rangers have a long way to go, and I think this is a big step in getting this guy to lead your franchise and bring him in and make a big impact. Sometimes the impact of a manager is overstated these days. I think that a lot of the decisions that, especially like late bullpen decisions or lineup construction or where to put people defensively, that a lot of times in the olden days, and by olden days I mean like 2010 or whatever, like not really all that long ago, that was a lot prescribed by the manager. Nowadays the front office is more hands-on, and I think that Bochy is going to be open and amenable to that. And, because San Francisco Giants were a very forward-thinking organization, I'm pretty sure they had some of that going on when he was still managing, 3 years ago? It's really not been that long. But I want to read a couple of quotes from the Rangers and from Bruce Bochy on his thoughts on all of this happening. This is from Bochy's written statement. He said, quote, "I'm incredibly excited to be joining the Texas Rangers. Over the last several days, I've had extensive conversations with Chris Young and other individuals in the organization, and I had a chance to meet with Ray Davis. Their vision and commitment to putting together a club that can contend and win year in and year out is impressive, and I became convinced I wanted to be a part of that. If I was going to return to managing, it had to be the right situation. I strongly believe this to be the case with the Rangers, and I can't wait to get started." That is all lovely things, and hearing all of that makes me think that the Rangers are going to, again, spend pretty big this offseason. They've got some big holes. It's going to start with Martin Perez being hopefully in the middle of that rotation and then getting at least one top of the rotation guy. Like I said, there are 3 main guys available. You could also go get a Chris Sale if you felt so inclined, who is, I think, 33.5 at this point, has a $27.5 million player option for next year that I'm not sure that he is going to take. And I think the Rangers really need one of deGrom, Verlander, or Rodon. I think it's going to be really difficult to get deGrom away from the Mets because their ownership is the richest in baseball, and we've already seen him talk very big about spending the most. He really hasn't. I mean, they spent a lot on Max Scherzer coming in, but that wasn't as long-term a deal. That wasn't the $300+ million. They did that on Francisco Lindor, which felt pretty easy, and they spent moderately on some of the other free agents, but they really didn't spend like the Rangers did. And I think the Rangers are going to be a lot more willing to go stupid on this on this free agent, on the amount of money that they would pay Jacob deGrom, who again is 34 years old, but when he's healthy, which is another huge caveat, is like one of the generational pitchers. He is just absolutely insane, but keeping him healthy the last 3, 4, 5 seasons has been a bit of a difficult task. The same thing can be said for Justin Verlander before this year, having been out of baseball for 2 years, then come back and looks incredible. Stealing him from out under the noses of the Astros would be just so delightful, especially since he's probably going to win the Cy Young this year, and especially if they get bounced in the ALCS and then they lose their guy who's been with them for this entire run of 7 straight years in the ALCS, which the Rangers never did. I mean, even the Rangers in their extended years of dominance, they had only 2 years where they actually won postseason series. They did in 2011 and 2010, and that was it. 2015, they got smoked by the Blue Jays. Same in 2016, which still boggles my mind, especially a rotation with prime Cole Hamels and prime Yu Darvish got just obliterated by the Blue Jays. But, that's neither here nor there. And I think that the Rangers are really desperate to get back to that and be a team that goes deep in the playoffs and has one of the best records year in and year out and is not afraid to go and spend big money on players again and again and again. And also develop, hopefully have some young options, pardon my pun, some Josh Young options and Ezekiel Duran options, and especially some starting pitching that could be developed theoretically if the Rangers had some top pitching prospects who remember that they're top pitching prospects and developed well and became really redonkulously good major league pitchers. That would be really nice. But there's a lot of things that have to go into a team going from worst to first. It doesn't happen in 1 year. Obviously, there was some improvement this year, but there was a lot of things that I think maybe a more seasoned veteran manager like Bruce Bochy could bring that Chris Woodward just couldn't, and Tony Beasley in his interim tenure could not. The Rangers are by no means all the way there. There's going to be a huge offseason full of a lot of transactions and starting pitching signing and extending Martin freaking Perez already. Like, you've done this. All right, now next week I'm expecting a Martin Perez extension. Make it 4 or 5 years. I don't care. Give him that money. Pay that man. Bring him back. Your only all-star that is homegrown and developed that you've had since forever. It's been the hottest of hot minutes. So this is a huge moment for the Rangers. This is a time to celebrate and party. This is not any time to be super skeptical. There's still so many more months until the Rangers play baseball again. So just ride this high for the next, month or so, or let's say 2 weeks, and then the Rangers extend Martin Perez. Then you can ride that high into the Rangers signing one of those ridiculously good pitchers in the offseason, or a pair of them like Rodon or deGrom, or maybe even a Verlander, because success is fun, but stealing success from the people you dislike is even more fun. Bruce Bochy is the Rangers manager. Things are good, and that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rangers. I'll be back next week, probably with just 4 episodes, unless there's something else crazy that happens. I'll probably have some more thoughts on the Bruce Bochy signing, but this literally just happened an hour ago, so I wanted to get an episode for y'all through the weekend. But thank y'all so much for listening. For your next listen, go check out Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan. Please just call him Sully. He gives you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present. It is free and available wherever you get your podcast. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.